I'm Anastasia Chatzka, a fashion designer with over 20 years of experience and a sewing educator. And I'm really excited you're here to share another sewing adventure with me today. Welcome to Sewing Anastasia, and today I'm going to show you how to set in a sleeve. The set in sleeve method is used for woven garments. This process is going to give you a nice curve to your shoulder, because if you don't set in your sleeve properly, you're going to have a flat shoulder and your sleeve is not going to fit right. So follow along and I'm going to show you how to set in your sleeves. If you're not already a subscriber to Sewing Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out. Right now I have a few videos coming out every single week. So many videos about sewing. So cool, right? And if you already subscribe, thank you so much for subscribing and following me along on my sewing adventures. And if you don't know, I now teach sewing classes in person in my design studio in Chicago, Illinois, and virtually. You can check those out at sewinganastasia.com. Let's say you bought a pattern for a sleeve or a blouse, and one of the steps coming up says to set in the sleeve. And it sounds super confusing and you don't know what to do or why you're doing it. Well, follow along and I'm going to show you exactly what to do and how to do it. This is actually super simple, so don't be scared of sleeves anymore. So I have my muslin blouse pattern cut out and I'm just going to be sewing up half of it. So I have my armhole here and I have my short sleeve here. And now we need to make the top of this sleeve fit into the armhole. But the top of this sleeve is bigger than that armhole. So what we need to do is create 2 lines of basting stitches to make it fit in properly. So I have my bodice side seam sewn up and I have my bodice shoulder sewn up. Now I need to work on the sleeve. So the first thing we're going to want to do is sew some basting stitches along the sleeve cap. You're going to want to sew your basting stitches from the notch on the front of your sleeve to the notches on the back of your sleeve. So we're going to be creating 2 rows of basting stitches around the top of the sleeve. The first row of basting stitches is going to be about 1/4 inch away, and your second row of basting stitches is going to be about 1/2 inch away. If you're wondering about the notches, these should already be on the pattern that you're cutting out. 1 is front and 2 means back. Now let's head over to the sewing machine and put some basting stitches in. So I have my sewing machine set up to a basting stitch, which means I have the stitch length super long and I am not going to be back stitching when I create these lines of stitching. And if you'd like to know more about basting, make sure you check out my video all about basting. Remember to line up the edge of your foot with the edge of your fabric for the first row of basting stitches. Remember to stop at your other notch. Make sure your needle's out of your fabric, lift up your foot, and give yourself some nice long thread tails and cut those off. Now for the second row of stitches, I'm going to line up the edge of my foot with that last row of stitches we just created. We lift our foot up and we pull it out. So you can see we have the 2 rows of basting stitches. I have my black threads on top and I have pink threads on the bottom. So you want to make sure you have your 2 top threads to the sleeve, and now we're going to gather it up. So we're going to take the fabric and we're going to pull it down the threads. So when I say we're going to gather it up, we don't actually want gathers in our sleeve, but we want to pull it enough to create shape around the shoulder. So you'll notice how this starts to create a shape at the shoulder. So we no longer have a flat piece of fabric, we have something that's going to curve over our shoulder. So once you've pulled it a bit and it looks good, we're going to go ahead and sew up the side seams right sides together. We're going to fold right sides together, and then my seam allowance is 1/2 inch, so I'm going to go ahead and sew up 1/2 inch. Back stitch at the beginning of the end, and this is a permanent stitch. Once you have your seam sewn together, go ahead and iron it flat open. So before we start pinning, we need to make sure that our garment is inside out, and if your sleeve's inside out, you have to flip it and make it right side out. Because when we insert it, we want right sides together. So let's go ahead and take our sleeve and put it into the armhole. Now the first thing you want to do is make sure you line up your underarm seams and put a pin there. You're also gonna wanna line up your notches for the front and the back of your sleeve. Now that you have the sleeve creating a nice shape, it should fit in. You might need to adjust your gathers or your ease a little bit once you get it into the sleeve. You can start to put a few pins in it and work your way around the armhole. Something you also want to keep in mind is that you want your sleeve to swing forward. So if we want our sleeve to swing forward, that means we need to move the notch to the back so that way the arm goes forward, because our arms naturally hang a bit forward. So just keep pinning all the way around and fitting the sleeve into the armhole. Make sure when you're pinning that you don't have any pleats or gathers that are happening here in the sleeve. If you do, work your fabric out on these 2 lines of stitches so it's nice and smooth. It's okay to have the very edge of the fabric waving or wobbling. That's completely natural. So you'll notice when I'm putting this in here, it kind of looks bubbly, but once we sew it, it's gonna even out and create this really nice shape around the shoulder. So you'll notice right here, this looks like it's pleating a little bit. So I'm just gonna move it around with my finger on the line of thread, on the basting thread. I'm gonna move a couple pins, and we're just gonna readjust this a little bit. So just keep readjusting the sleeve so that way you have no gathers in this. And if you need to, like I said, you can pull the threads again and suck up a little bit of the fabric. Okay, so this sleeve looks pretty good set in. I don't have any major gathers or pleats in this. It looks a little wobbly, which is completely normal. So now what we want to do is set our machine to a regular stitch, and we want to sew 1/2 inch all the way around, or whatever your seam allowance is on your pattern. Okay, so let's sew this sleeve down permanently and see how it's going to look. I also like to take the bed of my machine off, so that way it's really easy to fit the sleeve hole around the cylinder of the machine. When we start sewing, we're going to start sewing at the underarm seam. Line up your seam allowance, the 1/2 inch, or whatever your pattern seam allowance is. Make sure you back stitch. And let's continue our way all the way around the sleeve, making sure you're following your seam allowance. Now when I'm sewing, I also like to sew with the sleeve part facing me or in the inside, so that way I can make sure I'm not going to sew any pleats or puckers into it. So just keep turning the sleeve as you're sewing. So sew a little, stop, turn the sleeve, line it up, make sure nothing is caught underneath. If you come up to a spot where you think you're going to get a pleat or a gather, just smooth it out with your finger. Back stitch when you get to the underarm and cut. We did it! We set in the sleeve. Now, wasn't that easy? It's kind of like magic. When you know exactly what to do and your projects turn out, it feels so good. But we have one last step. We want to remove these basting stitches so that way it releases the sleeve and gives it a little bit more movement. You'll notice when I pull these basting stitches out how the sleeve releases a little bit and starts to create even more shape. Okay, check that out. Beautiful shape in the sleeve. Let's turn it to the inside and make sure we get rid of all these basting stitches. Great, no basting stitches on the inside. So also notice how your sleeve does look a little wavy still, totally fine and completely normal. you can go ahead and hit that with an iron and put a sleeve roll in it or a ham, and it's gonna get even smoother for you. So now you'll notice that the sleeve fits really nice over the shoulder. It's not flat. And remember, that sleeve pattern was bigger than the actual armhole, and we made it fit with no gathering or no pleats and no puckers. And that's because we put those basting stitches in there. I know when I first started sewing, I totally didn't get this process, and I think all my sleeves were gathered sleeves or puff sleeves, well, because it was easier. Well, not technically easier, you just need to know what to do. And now you do! So exciting! You don't need to be afraid of set-in sleeves anymore. Thanks so much for watching Sewing Anastasia today. If you have any questions on how to set in a sleeve, leave it down below and I will get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, give it some applause, and send me pictures of your set-in sleeves, and make sure you tag Sewing Anastasia so that way I can repost them and share them with everyone else. And if you don't already follow me on social media outside of YouTube, like Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Pinterest, well, make sure you follow me so that way we can stay connected and inspiring each other. And don't forget, I'm now teaching sewing classes in person in my studio in Chicago and virtually, and you can check those out at sewinganastasia.com. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that way you know when all the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for following me on my sewing adventures. I love sharing my sewing knowledge with you. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!